in the spotlight of belief. The city pulsed with ambition, its skyline glittering like 1,000 promises waiting to be fulfilled. Adrian Lee, a film producer with a reputation for spotting talent where others saw only shadows, walked briskly down the narrow street toward a small community theater. His colleagues often teased him for wasting time in places like this. Why bother with amateur productions when Hollywood's brightest stars were already lining up for roles? But Adrian knew better. True brilliance was rarely found in the spotlight. It flickered in hidden corners, waiting for someone brave enough to notice. The theater was modest, its paint peeling, its seats worn from years of use. Yet, as Adrian settled into the second row, he felt a familiar thrill. He wasn't here for grandeur. He was here for discovery. The play began. The set was simple, the dialogue unremarkable. But then, a young man stepped onto the stage, and the air shifted. His name, printed in small letters on the program, was Ethan Park. He wasn't conventionally striking, but his presence was undeniable. His eyes carried storms, his movements spoke of fragility and strength intertwined. When he delivered his lines, the audience leaned forward, drawn into the raw honesty of his performance. Adrian's pulse quickened. This wasn't acting, it was confession. Ethan wasn't pretending to be the character. He was living him, bleeding truth into every gesture. Adrian had seen hundreds of actors, but rarely had he encountered someone who could silence a room with nothing more than a pause. When the curtain fell, the applause was polite, almost indifferent. But Adrian's heart was pounding. He knew talent when he saw it, and Ethan had something rare: authenticity. He decided he had to meet him. Backstage, chaos reigned as actors laughed, congratulated one another, and hurried to change out of costumes. Ethan, however, sat alone in the corner, shoulders hunched, eyes clouded. He looked like a boy carrying the weight of the world, invisible even in the aftermath of his brilliance. Adrian approached, his voice calm but firm. "Ethan Park." Ethan looked up, startled. His eyes widened, and for a moment, Adrian saw the vulnerability that had captivated him on stage. "Yes? I'm Adrian Lee. I produce films. I saw your performance tonight." Adrian extended his hand. Ethan hesitated before shaking it, his grip weak, uncertain. "You are extraordinary," Adrian continued. "Have you ever considered acting professionally?" Ethan's lips parted, but no words came. He looked down, fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. Finally, he whispered, "I don't think I'm good enough." Adrian frowned. "Not good enough? You just held an entire audience in silence. That's not something you can fake." Ethan shook his head, his voice trembling. "My family, they don't believe in me. They say acting is a waste of time. I'm supposed to take over the family business. Tonight was just something I did because I couldn't breathe otherwise." Adrian studied him carefully. He recognized the signs: the suffocating grip of a toxic environment, the weight of expectations crushing fragile dreams. Ethan's talent was being strangled before it could bloom. "Listen," Adrian said firmly. "Families can be wrong. You have something rare, Ethan. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Ethan's eyes shimmered with a mix of hope and fear. "But what if I fail?" Adrian leaned closer, his voice steady. "Then you fail forward. But if you never try, you'll fail before you even begin." That night, Ethan walked home with Adrian's words echoing in his mind. His family's voices were louder, crueler, but Adrian's belief lingered like a spark in the darkness. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, torn between fear and possibility. For the first time, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, his dreams weren't foolish after all. Adrian, meanwhile, couldn't shake Ethan from his thoughts. He had seen countless actors, but Ethan's vulnerability was different. It wasn't just talent, it was truth. And truth was the heartbeat of cinema. Adrian knew he had stumbled upon something extraordinary, and he wasn't about to let it slip away. The following week, Adrian returned to the theater. Ethan was surprised to see him, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You came back?" Adrian nodded. "I don't waste my time, Ethan. I meant what I said. You have potential. I want to help you." "Why me? There are so many better actors out there." Adrian's gaze was unwavering. Because you're not just an actor. You're a storyteller. And the world needs storytellers who bleed truth. Ethan swallowed hard, his chest tightening. No one had ever believed in him so fiercely. For the first time, he felt seen. Over the next few weeks, Adrian made it his mission to guide Ethan. He invited him to rehearsals, introduced him to industry professionals, and gave him scripts to practice. At first, Ethan was timid, stumbling over lines, second-guessing himself. But Adrian was patient, offering constructive feedback without judgment. One evening, after a particularly emotional rehearsal, Ethan confessed, "Every time I hear my father's voice in my head, telling me I'm worthless, I freeze. I can't stop thinking about it." Then replace his voice with mine. "You belong here." For the first time, he allowed himself to believe it. Slowly, the chains of doubt began to loosen. Adrian also noticed something else. Ethan's vulnerability wasn't just a weakness, it was his strength. He could channel pain into performance, turning scars into art. Adrian admired that resilience deeply, and though he tried to remain professional, he couldn't deny the growing warmth he felt whenever Ethan smiled. Their bond was forming, fragile yet undeniable. Adrian was the Semeh, steady and protective, guiding Ethan through the storm. Ethan, the Yuk, carried fragility and fire, his dreams flickering like a candle in the wind. Together, they were beginning a journey neither had anticipated, a journey of art, ambition, and something deeper that neither dared to name. Ethan woke the next morning with Adrian's words still echoing in his mind. Families can be wrong. Dreams aren't wasteful. He had never heard anyone speak with such conviction about him, about his worth. The thought lingered as he moved through his day, though the familiar heaviness of his father's criticisms tried to drown it out. By evening, when his phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number, he hesitated before answering. Adrian's voice came through, calm and steady, asking him to come to a rehearsal the next day. It wasn't a big role, Adrian explained, but it would give Ethan a chance to watch, to learn, maybe even to read a few lines. Ethan's first instinct was to refuse. He wasn't ready. He wasn't good enough, but Adrian's tone left no room for retreat. "You'll never feel ready," Adrian said. "That's why you have to start anyway." The studio was alive with energy when Ethan arrived. Actors rehearsed, directors barked instructions, assistants rushed about with clipboards and coffee cups. Ethan felt small, insignificant, but Adrian's presence steadied him. He handed Ethan a script, his expression firm but encouraging. "Just read," Adrian said. "Don't think about being perfect. Think about being honest." Ethan nodded, his hands trembling as he held the pages. When he began reading, his voice faltered. He stumbled over words, his gaze darting nervously toward the other actors. A few chuckles rippled through the room. Not cruel, but enough to make his cheeks burn. Adrian stepped forward, his tone sharp but kind. "Stop. Don't rush. Acting isn't about speed. It's about truth. Take a breath. Feel the words. Then speak." Ethan closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and tried again. This time, his voice carried emotion. His delivery was imperfect, but genuine. The room quieted, the laughter fading into silence. When he finished, Adrian gave a small nod. "Better. Much better." Ethan's chest swelled with a mixture of relief and pride. For the first time, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he belonged. Later that night, the studio was empty except for the two of them. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the silence. Ethan sat on the edge of the stage, his shoulders slumped. "I keep hearing my father's voice," he admitted. "Every time I try, it's like he's there, telling me I'm wasting my life." Then replace his voice with mine. "Hear me when I say you are capable. You are talented. You belong here." Ethan blinked, startled by the intensity in Adrian's tone. "And because I see something in you that deserves to be seen." Ethan's throat tightened. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Weeks passed, and Adrian continued to mentor him. He gave Ethan exercises, introduced him to professionals, and pushed him to audition for small roles. At first, Ethan was terrified, stumbling through lines and battling nerves. But slowly, he began to improve. One afternoon, Adrian arranged for Ethan to perform a short monologue in front of a small group of industry friends. Ethan's hands shook as he stepped onto the stage, his heart pounding. But when he began, something shifted. He poured his pain, his longing, his hope into the words. His voice trembled, but his eyes burned with emotion. Then, applause erupted. Ethan's chest tightened, tears threatening to spill. He looked at Adrian, who gave him a subtle nod of approval. As Ethan's confidence grew, so did his bond with Adrian. One evening, after a particularly emotional rehearsal, Ethan sat beside Adrian on the studio steps. Yet despite his progress, Ethan's family remained a looming shadow. His father berated him for wasting time, his mother dismissed his achievements, and his siblings mocked his ambitions. One night, after a heated argument at home, Ethan showed up at Adrian's office, his eyes red from crying. "They'll never accept me," Ethan whispered. Adrian stood, walked over, and placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "But they're my family." Ethan's voice cracked. "And family should lift you up, not tear you down," Adrian said firmly. "I see your value." Ethan looked at him, tears glistening. "And because you matter to me." Ethan's heart raced, but for the first time, he felt seen. That night, as Ethan lay in bed, he thought about Adrian's words. "You matter to me." They echoed in his mind, louder than his father's criticisms, stronger than his family's doubts. For the first time, he felt a flicker of hope, not just for his career, but for himself. Ethan's first real audition came sooner than he expected. Adrian had arranged it quietly, not wanting to overwhelm him with pressure, but when he told Ethan, the young man nearly dropped the script he was holding. A professional audition, in front of casting directors who had worked on films Ethan had only ever admired from afar. It felt impossible. His hands shook as he read the details, his mind already filling with doubts. Adrian noticed the panic in his eyes and spoke firmly. "You're ready. You may not feel it, but you are." Ethan wanted to believe him, but the voices of his family echoed louder. His father's sneer, his mother's dismissive sigh, his siblings' mocking laughter. All of it pressed down on him like a weight he couldn't escape. The morning of the audition, Ethan stood outside the building, staring at the glass doors as though they were the gates to another world. Adrian was beside him, calm and steady, his presence grounding. "Remember," Adrian said, "you're not here to prove them wrong. You're here to prove yourself right." Ethan swallowed hard and nodded, though his legs felt like they might give out. He walked inside, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the air thick with nerves. The waiting room was filled with actors, each one polished, confident, rehearsing lines under their breath. Ethan felt small, his script crumpled in his hands. He wanted to run, but Adrian's hand on his shoulder kept him rooted. When his name was called, he stepped into the audition room, his heart pounding. The casting directors sat behind a long table, their expressions unreadable. Ethan stood in the center, the spotlight harsh, unforgiving. He began his monologue, his voice trembling at first, but then something shifted. He remembered Adrian's words, "Don't think about being perfect, think about being honest." He let the emotion flow, his pain and longing spilling into the lines. His voice grew stronger, his gestures more fluid, his vulnerability raw. When he finished, silence hung in the air. One director scribbled notes, another whispered to her colleague. Finally, the lead casting director said, "Thank you. We'll be in touch." Ethan bowed slightly and left the room, his stomach twisting. Outside, he collapsed onto a bench, burying his face in his hands. "I messed up," he muttered. Adrian sat beside him, his tone calm. "You didn't mess up. You gave them truth. That's all you can do." "But they didn't smile," Ethan whispered. "They didn't. Casting directors rarely show emotion," Adrian interrupted. "Don't read into it. What matters is that you showed up, you delivered, and you grew. That's progress." Ethan looked at him, eyes shimmering. "Why do you always believe in me more than I do?" Adrian's lips curved into a faint smile. "And one day, you'll see it too." Weeks passed, and the call never came. Ethan's hope dwindled with each day, his confidence cracking. One evening, he stormed into Adrian's office, frustration spilling from him. "They didn't even call me back. I knew it. I'm not good enough." Adrian set down his pen, meeting Ethan's gaze calmly. "Failure is part of the process. Every actor faces rejection. It doesn't mean you're not good enough. It means you're still climbing." "But it hurts," Ethan whispered. "It feels like proof that my family was right." Adrian stood, walking over to him. "Ethan, listen to me. Rejection isn't proof of failure. It's proof that you tried. And every no brings you closer to the right yes." Ethan's shoulders slumped. "What if the right yes never comes? Then you'll keep fighting until it does. Because dreams worth having are dreams worth bleeding for." Ethan stared at him, the words sinking deep. Slowly, he nodded, though doubt still lingered in his eyes. Months later, Adrian secured Ethan another audition, this time for a supporting role in a drama film. Ethan walked into the room with newfound determination, his posture straighter, his voice steadier. He delivered his lines with conviction, channeling every ounce of pain and hope he carried. This time, the casting director leaned forward, intrigued. "You have something," she said. "It's raw, but it's powerful. We'll give you a chance." Ethan's heart soared. When he told Adrian the news, his voice trembled with excitement. "They said yes. I got the role. The right yes always comes." Ethan laughed, tears threatening to spill. "I couldn't have done it without you. You did it because you believed in yourself, finally. I just reminded you of what was already there." The film set was chaotic, buzzing with activity. Ethan stood in costume, nerves fluttering in his chest. Adrian watched from behind the monitors, his gaze unwavering. When the director called action, Ethan transformed. His voice carried emotion, his movements precise yet natural. He embodied the character fully, drawing the crew into his performance. When the scene ended, the director clapped. "Brilliant. That's exactly what I wanted." Ethan's cheeks flushed with pride. He glanced at Adrian, who gave him a subtle nod of approval. That nod meant more than any applause. It was validation from the man who had believed in him from the start. As Ethan's career began to take shape, his bond with Adrian deepened. They spent long nights discussing scripts, dissecting performances, and sharing dreams. Adrian admired Ethan's resilience, while Ethan found comfort in Adrian's unwavering support. One evening, after a particularly emotional shoot, Ethan sat beside Adrian on the studio steps. Adrian hesitated, then replied, "Because you remind me of myself when I was younger. Hungry, scared, desperate to prove something. But more than that, because you matter to me in ways I can't ignore." His heart raced, not just from the words, but from the sincerity in Adrian's eyes. Yet despite his progress, Ethan's family remained a thorn in his side. When they learned of his role, his father scoffed. "A supporting role?" Ethan stormed out, his chest tight. The premiere night of Ethan's first film arrived like a dream he wasn't sure he deserved. The theater was grand, its red carpet glowing under the flash of cameras, its air thick with anticipation. Ethan stood at the edge of it all, his suit slightly too stiff, his hands clammy. He had never imagined himself here, surrounded by actors and directors whose names had always seemed untouchable. Adrian walked beside him, calm and composed, his presence steadying Ethan's nerves. Ethan tried to believe it, though his heart raced with doubt. Inside, the theater buzzed with chatter. Ethan sat among the cast, his stomach twisting as the lights dimmed and the film began. He watched himself on the screen, every gesture magnified, every emotion laid bare. At first, he cringed, convinced he looked foolish. But as the story unfolded, he saw something different. He saw truth. His performance wasn't polished, but it was real. And when the credits rolled, the applause was louder than he had dared to hope. Afterward, critics mingled with the audience, their voices carrying snippets of praise. One reviewer approached Ethan, her eyes bright. "You were the highlight of the film," she said. "Your performance had depth." Ethan's breath caught, his chest tightening with disbelief. He stammered a thank you, his cheeks burning. Adrian watched from a distance, his lips curving into a faint smile. He had known this moment would come, but seeing Ethan's joy made it all the more powerful. Later that night, Adrian handed Ethan a newspaper with an early review. "Read this," he said. Ethan scanned the words, his eyes widening. They praised his authenticity, his ability to convey emotion with subtlety. They called him a rising star. Ethan's hands shook as he held the paper. "I never thought I'd see this day," he whispered. "It's only the beginning. One day, you'll hold a Best Actor award in your hands. And when you do, remember this moment, because it's proof that dreams grow from seeds of belief." Ethan's eyes glistened. "If that day comes, it'll be because of you." Adrian shook his head.
"No, Ethan."
"It'll be because of you." The weeks following the premiere were a whirlwind. Ethan's name began to circulate in industry circles, his performance drawing attention. Invitations to auditions arrived, small roles offered, opportunities opening like doors he had once thought locked forever. Yet with each success came new challenges. The industry was harsh, its demands relentless. Ethan struggled with rejection, with criticism, with the pressure to prove himself again and again. But Adrian was always there, guiding him, reminding him of his worth. One evening, after a grueling audition that left Ethan drained, he sat with Adrian in the quiet of the studio. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," Ethan admitted. "It feels like every step forward comes with 2 steps back. That's the nature of the climb. But every step, even backward, teaches you something. You're stronger than you think." Ethan looked at him, his voice trembling. "What if I'm not?" Adrian leaned closer, his tone firm. "Then I'll remind you until you believe it." Their bond deepened in ways neither had anticipated. Adrian admired Ethan's resilience, his ability to turn pain into art. Ethan, in turn, found solace in Adrian's unwavering belief. They shared late-night conversations about dreams, fears, and the meaning of storytelling. In those moments, the line between mentor and companion blurred. Adrian was no longer just a producer guiding an actor. He was someone Ethan trusted with his heart. But shadows lingered. Ethan's family remained dismissive, their voices a constant reminder of the battle he fought. When they learned of the premiere, his father scoffed. "A small role in a small film? That's nothing. You're wasting your life." Ethan clenched his fists, anger boiling. "It's not nothing. It's a start. And I'm proud of it." His father sneered. "Pride won't pay the bills." Ethan stormed out, his chest tight, his mind spinning. He found himself at Adrian's office again, voice trembling. "Why can't they just be happy for me?" Adrian sighed, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Because they're trapped in their own fears. But you're not. You're breaking free. That's what matters. I wish I could be as strong as you." Adrian's voice was firm. "You just don't see it yet." That night, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His father's words still stung, but Adrian's voice was louder, steadier. He repeated it to himself like a mantra, clinging to it as though it were a lifeline. For the first time, he believed that maybe strength wasn't about being fearless. It was about fighting even when fear threatened to consume you. And with Adrian by his side, he felt like he could keep fighting. The next morning, Ethan woke with a new determination. He looked at himself in the mirror, his reflection no longer a stranger. He saw an actor, a dreamer, someone who had survived doubt and rejection and was still standing. He thought of Adrian, of the way his eyes softened when he spoke, of the warmth in his voice when he said, "You matter to me." And for the first time, Ethan allowed himself to believe that maybe he did. Adrian, meanwhile, watched Ethan's growth with quiet pride. Ethan's career began to accelerate after the premiere. His name appeared in conversations he had never imagined himself part of, and invitations to auditions arrived with increasing frequency. Yet with opportunity came pressure, and the industry's demands were relentless. Every audition felt like a battlefield, every rejection a wound. Adrian watched him closely, guiding him through each step, but even his steady presence couldn't erase the weight Ethan carried. One afternoon, Ethan sat in a cafe, staring at a script. His hands trembled as he tried to memorize lines, his mind clouded with doubt. Adrian joined him, sliding into the seat across from him. "You're overthinking," Adrian said. Acting isn't about memorizing. It's about living. Ethan sighed, frustration spilling out. But what if I'm not good enough? What if they see me and realize I don't belong? Adrian leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. Then let them see. Let them see your truth. That's what makes you different. Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to believe, but fear gnawed at him. The audition that followed was brutal. The director was sharp, impatient, demanding perfection. Ethan stumbled, his voice faltering, his confidence cracking. When it ended, he left the room feeling hollow. Outside, he collapsed against the wall, his breath shallow. Adrian found him there, his expression calm but firm. "You think failure defines you," Adrian said. "But it doesn't. What defines you is the courage to stand up again." Ethan looked at him, tears brimming. "I don't know if I have that courage." "You do. I see it every time you walk into a room, even when you don't." Their bond grew stronger in the quiet moments between auditions. Adrian became more than a mentor. He was a constant, a presence Ethan leaned on when the world felt too heavy. They shared late-night conversations, laughter over coffee, silence that spoke louder than words. Ethan began to notice the way Adrian's eyes lingered on him, the warmth in his voice when he spoke, the subtle gestures of care. One evening, after a long day of rehearsals, they sat together in Adrian's office. The city lights glowed outside the window, casting shadows across the room. Ethan leaned back, exhausted. Ethan's rise was gradual but undeniable. After the premiere, his name began to circulate more widely, and soon he was auditioning for roles that carried more weight. The industry, however, was not kind. For every opportunity, there were whispers of politics, favoritism, and the harsh reality that talent alone was rarely enough. Ethan felt the sting of rejection more acutely now, not because he doubted his ability, but because he had begun to believe in himself, and belief made failure hurt more. Adrian watched him carefully, guiding him through the maze of auditions and meetings. He knew the industry well, knew its cruelty and its brilliance, and he was determined to shield Ethan from the worst of it. Yet he also knew Ethan had to face it head-on if he was to grow. One evening, after a particularly difficult audition where Ethan had been dismissed without a second glance, he sat in Adrian's office, his voice trembling. "They didn't even look at me," Ethan whispered. "It was like I wasn't even there." Adrian leaned forward, his gaze steady. "That's not about you. That's about them." Sometimes directors already know who they want before auditions even begin. You can't take it personally. Ethan's eyes shimmered with frustration. "But it feels personal. But you have to keep fighting. Every rejection is just another step toward the role that will change everything." Their bond deepened in these moments of vulnerability. Adrian became more than a mentor. He was a confidant, a steady presence in the chaos. Ethan began to notice the way Adrian's eyes lingered on him, the warmth in his voice, the subtle gestures of care. And though he tried to ignore it, his heart raced whenever Adrian was near. The tension between them grew, unspoken but undeniable. One night, after a long day of rehearsals, they sat together in Adrian's apartment, the city lights glowing outside the window. He looked away, cheeks burning, but a quiet smile tugged at his lips. Critics praised his authenticity, but others dismissed him as inexperienced. He faced rejection after rejection, each one a reminder of how fragile success could be. Yet Adrian's belief never wavered. He pushed Ethan to keep going, to fight for every opportunity. And slowly, Ethan began to see himself differently. He was an actor, a storyteller, someone who could turn pain into art. But the shadow of his family lingered. His father's voice haunted him, his mother's indifference cut deep. One night, after another argument, Ethan stormed out of his house, his chest tight with anger. He found himself at Adrian's door, his voice trembling. "They'll never accept me. Maybe I should just give up." Adrian stood, walked over, and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Listen to me. Their approval is not the measure of your worth. You don't need their permission to chase your dreams." Ethan's eyes shimmered with tears. "But they're my family, and family should lift you up, not tear you down," Adrian said firmly. "You have a new family now, people who see your value." I see your value. The words sank deep, louder than the voices of doubt. Ethan felt something shift inside him, a flicker of strength he hadn't known he possessed. He looked at Adrian, his heart racing. Why do you care so much? Adrian paused, his voice softening. Because I know what it's like to be told you're not enough. Ethan's second film was bigger, louder, and far more demanding than anything he had done before. The role was not a lead, but it was significant enough to put him in the spotlight. The production was filled with seasoned actors, each one polished and confident, and Ethan felt the weight of their presence pressing down on him. He had worked tirelessly to prepare, but the fear of being overshadowed gnawed at him. Adrian was there, as always, watching from behind the monitors, his gaze steady, his presence grounding. You don't have to outshine them, Adrian had told him. You just have to be yourself. Ethan repeated those words like a mantra as the cameras rolled. On set, Ethan gave everything he had. His performance was raw, his emotions genuine, and though he stumbled at times, he carried the role with a quiet strength that drew attention. The director praised him, the crew admired his dedication, and slowly, Ethan began to feel like he belonged. Yet not everyone welcomed him. One of the senior actors, a man known for his arrogance, sneered at Ethan during breaks. You're just a kid, he said. You don't deserve to be here. Ethan's chest tightened, doubt flooding back. But Adrian stepped in, his voice calm but firm. He deserves to be here as much as anyone. The tension between them was palpable, but Adrian's defense gave Ethan the courage to keep going. The rivalry grew as the production continued. The senior actor mocked Ethan's inexperience, tried to undermine him during rehearsals, and whispered to others that Ethan was only there because Adrian had connections. Ethan felt the sting of those words, but Adrian reminded him that jealousy was often a mask for fear. They see your potential, Adrian said. That's why they're threatened. One evening, after a particularly difficult day on set, Ethan sat with Adrian in the quiet of the studio. His voice trembled as he spoke. Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't deserve this. Adrian leaned closer, his gaze unwavering. You deserve every opportunity you've earned. Don't let their bitterness become your truth. Their bond had grown stronger, deeper, and though neither spoke of it openly, the tension between them was undeniable. Critics noted his authenticity, his ability to convey emotion with subtlety, and his name began to rise in conversations about promising new actors. Yet the whispers of rivalry followed him. The senior actor spread rumors, claiming Ethan was favored because of Adrian, that his success was undeserved. The industry continued to test him, but Ethan began to see himself differently. He wasn't just a boy from a toxic family, trapped in doubt. He was an actor, a storyteller, someone who could turn pain into art. And with Adrian by his side, he felt like he could face anything. Their bond was no longer just professional, it was personal, intimate, and though neither had spoken the words aloud, they both felt it. That night, as Ethan lay awake, he thought of Adrian. He thought of the way his eyes lingered, the warmth in his voice, the quiet strength he carried. Fame arrived like a storm, sudden and overwhelming. Ethan had always imagined recognition as something bright and liberating, but when it came, it carried shadows he hadn't anticipated. His face appeared in magazines, his name trended online, and strangers began to recognize him on the street. At first, it was exhilarating. He felt seen, validated, as though the years of doubt and rejection had finally given way to something tangible.
But soon, the scrutiny began.
Every gesture was analyzed, every word dissected, and whispers about his personal life spread faster than his achievements. Ethan's smile grew tighter, his shoulders heavier, his laughter less frequent. One evening, after a press event where reporters had asked invasive questions about his family, Ethan sat in Adrian's apartment, his voice trembling. They don't care about my acting, he whispered. They just want gossip. Adrian poured him a glass of water, his tone calm but firm. That's the price of visibility. But remember, the noise isn't the truth. The truth is in your work. Ethan looked at him, his eyes shimmering with frustration. But it hurts. I know. But you can't let their voices drown out your own. Ethan landed a lead role in a new film, a project that promised to elevate his career further. The director was demanding, the schedule grueling, but Ethan poured himself into the role. He lived the character, breathed him, and when the cameras rolled, he gave everything he had. Yet the pressure was immense. Critics speculated whether he was ready, whether his success was a fluke, whether he could carry a film on his own. Ethan felt the weight of those doubts pressing down on him, but Adrian reminded him that greatness was born from risk. "You're not here to be safe," Adrian said. "You're here to be extraordinary." One night, after a particularly intense day on set, Ethan returned to Adrian's apartment, exhausted. The film premiered months later, and Ethan's performance drew praise. Critics hailed him as a rising star, noting his authenticity and emotional depth. His name began to appear in conversations about awards, and whispers of a Best Actor nomination surfaced. Ethan felt a surge of pride, but also fear. The higher he climbed, the louder the scrutiny became. The truth will always outshine lies. Their bond deepened further in the aftermath of the premiere. And he realized that his dreams weren't just about acting. They were about finding the courage to believe in himself and the love that had begun to grow between them. Awards season arrived with a mix of anticipation and dread. For Ethan, the idea of being considered for a Best Actor nomination felt surreal, almost impossible. He had spent years convincing himself he wasn't good enough, and now the industry whispered his name alongside seasoned professionals. The thought thrilled him, but it also terrified him. Every headline, every article, every conversation seemed to dissect his worth, questioning whether he truly deserved to stand among the greats. Adrian noticed the change immediately. Ethan's smile grew tighter, his laughter less frequent, his shoulders heavier. One evening, after a press conference where reporters had asked pointed questions about his sudden rise, Ethan sat in Adrian's office, his voice trembling. "They don't care about the work," he whispered. "They just want to know if I'm a fluke." Adrian leaned back, his gaze steady. "That's the nature of recognition. The higher you climb, the louder the doubts become. But remember, the doubts aren't the truth. The truth is in your performance." Ethan looked at him, his eyes shimmering with fear. "But what if I fail?" Adrian's voice softened. "Then you fail forward. But if you never try, you'll fail before you even begin." The tension between them grew stronger in these moments of vulnerability. Adrian became more than a mentor. He was a refuge, a place where Ethan could shed the weight of fame and simply exist. Ethan began to notice the way Adrian's presence calmed him, the way his voice steadied him, the way his eyes lingered with warmth. And though he tried to suppress it, his heart raced whenever Adrian was near. The industry continued to test him. Ethan's lead role drew praise, but also criticism. Some hailed him as a rising star, while others dismissed him as inexperienced. Rumors spread about his relationship with Adrian, whispers that his success was tied to favoritism. Ethan felt the sting of those accusations, but Adrian stood by him, unwavering. "Let them talk," Adrian said. "The truth will always outshine lies." Ethan wanted to believe it, but the whispers lingered. One night, after a particularly intense day of interviews and press events, Ethan returned to Adrian's apartment, exhausted. He collapsed onto the couch, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know if I can do this." Adrian sat beside him, his gaze steady. "You can. You already are. And because you matter to me." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken emotion. Ethan felt his chest tighten, his breath catching. He looked away, cheeks burning, but the warmth in Adrian's eyes lingered. Their bond had grown stronger, deeper, and though neither had spoken the words aloud, they both felt it. The nominations were announced weeks later. Ethan sat with Adrian, his hands trembling as the list was read. When his name appeared under Best Actor, his breath caught, his chest tightening with disbelief. He looked at Adrian, tears brimming. I was nominated." Adrian's smile was genuine, his eyes warm. "I told you. One day, you'd hold this moment in your hands." Ethan's voice trembled. "I never thought it would be real." Adrian's tone softened. "It's real because you made it real." The nomination brought both joy and pressure. Ethan's name appeared in headlines, his face on magazine covers, his every move scrutinized. He felt the weight of expectation pressing down on him, the fear of disappointing those who believed in him. Yet through it all, Adrian remained his anchor, reminding him that the award was not the measure of his worth. "Whether you win or not," Adrian said, "you've already proven yourself." "But I want to win." Adrian's gaze softened. "Then fight for it. But remember, the victory isn't in the award. It's in the journey that brought you here." Their bond deepened further in the aftermath of the nomination. Ethan found himself drawn to Adrian in ways he couldn't ignore. He noticed the way Adrian's eyes softened when they spoke, the warmth in his voice, the quiet strength he carried. And though he tried to suppress it, his heart raced whenever Adrian was near. The industry continued to test him. Ethan's lead role drew praise, but also criticism. Some hailed him as a rising star, while others dismissed him as inexperienced. Rumors spread about his relationship with Adrian, whispers that his success was tied to favoritism. Ethan felt the sting of those accusations, but Adrian stood by him, unwavering. "Let them talk," Adrian said. "The truth will always outshine lies." Ethan wanted to believe it, but the whispers lingered. One night, after a particularly intense day of interviews and press events, Ethan returned to Adrian's apartment, exhausted. He collapsed onto the couch, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know if I can do this." Adrian sat beside him, his gaze steady.
"You can."
"You already are. And because you matter to me." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken emotion. Ethan felt his chest tighten, his breath catching. He looked away, cheeks burning, but the warmth in Adrian's eyes lingered. Their bond had grown stronger, deeper, and though neither had spoken the words aloud, they both felt it. The nominations were announced weeks later. Ethan sat with Adrian, his hands trembling as the list was read. When his name appeared under Best Actor, his breath caught, his chest tightening with disbelief. He looked at Adrian, tears brimming. I was nominated." Adrian's smile was genuine, his eyes warm. "I told you. One day, you'd hold this moment in your hands." Ethan's voice trembled. "I never thought it would be real." Adrian's tone softened. "It's real because you made it real." The nomination brought both joy and pressure. Ethan's name appeared in headlines, his face on magazine covers, his every move scrutinized. He felt the weight of expectation pressing down on him, the fear of disappointing those who believed in him. Yet through it all, Adrian remained his anchor, reminding him that the award was not the measure of his worth. "Whether you win or not," Adrian said, "you've already proven yourself." "But I want to win." Adrian's gaze softened. "Then fight for it. But remember, the victory isn't in the award, it's in the journey that brought you here." Their bond deepened further in the aftermath of the nomination. Ethan found himself drawn to Adrian in ways he couldn't ignore. He noticed the way Adrian's eyes softened when they spoke, the warmth in his voice, the quiet strength he carried. And though he tried to suppress it, his heart raced whenever Adrian was near. One night, after a long day of interviews and press events, they sat together in Adrian's apartment, the city lights glowing outside the window. Ethan leaned back, exhausted, his head resting against the couch. "Do you ever wonder why you care so much about me?" he asked softly. Adrian hesitated, then answered, "Because you remind me of myself when I was younger, hungry, scared, desperate to prove something. But more than that, because you matter to me." The words echoed in his mind, louder than the voices of doubt, stronger than the whispers of rivalry. That night, Ethan lay awake, replaying the moment. Adrian's words echoed in his mind, stronger than his father's criticisms, steadier than his family's doubts. For the first time, he felt hope, not just for his career, but for himself. He thought of Adrian, of the way his eyes softened when he spoke, of the warmth in his voice, of the quiet strength he carried. And he realized that his dreams weren't just about acting. They were about finding the courage to believe in himself and the love that had begun to grow between them. Adrian, meanwhile, sat in his office, staring at the city lights. He had mentored many actors before, but Ethan was different. There was something about him, his vulnerability, his strength, his quiet determination, that stirred something deep within Adrian. He knew their journey was only beginning, but already it felt like destiny. The night of the awards ceremony arrived with a weight Ethan could hardly bear. The theater glowed with golden lights, the red carpet stretched endlessly, and the air buzzed with anticipation. Ethan stood among the brightest stars of the industry, his suit tailored perfectly, his hair styled, but inside he felt like the same boy who had once been told by his father that acting was a waste of time. Adrian walked beside him, calm and steady, his presence grounding Ethan in the chaos. "You belong here," Adrian whispered as they stepped into the lights. Ethan nodded, though his heart raced with doubt. Inside, the ceremony unfolded with grandeur. Famous actors and directors filled the seats, their laughter echoing, their applause thunderous. Ethan sat quietly, his hands clenched, his mind spinning. He thought of his family, of their dismissive words, of the nights he had cried in Adrian's office, of the countless auditions that had ended in rejection. And now, here he was, nominated for Best Actor. It felt unreal, like a dream he might wake from at any moment. The categories were announced one by one, the winners stepping onto the stage, their speeches filled with gratitude and triumph. Ethan's chest tightened as his category approached. The announcer's voice rang out, listing the nominees. His name echoed through the theater, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. He looked at Adrian, whose gaze was steady, unwavering. "You've already won," Adrian whispered. Ethan swallowed hard, his breath shallow. The envelope was opened, the name read aloud. Ethan Park. For a heartbeat, Ethan couldn't move. The applause erupted, the lights blazed, and suddenly he was on his feet, his body trembling. Adrian's hand brushed his shoulder, grounding him, reminding him that this was real. Ethan walked to the stage, his steps unsteady, his heart pounding. He accepted the award, the golden statue heavy in his hands, the weight of years of doubt and struggle pressed into its gleaming surface. He stood at the microphone, his voice trembling. I don't know what to say." He paused, his eyes scanning the audience, his mind racing. "I was told for years that I wasn't good enough, that my dreams were foolish, that I should give up. But tonight, standing here, I realize that dreams aren't foolish. They're the fire that keeps us alive." His voice grew stronger, his eyes burning with emotion. "I want to thank the people who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." He looked at Adrian, his gaze lingering. "Adrian Lee, you gave me hope when I had none. You reminded me that I mattered. This award isn't just mine, it's ours." The audience erupted in applause, but Ethan barely heard it. His eyes were locked on Adrian, whose expression softened, pride and something deeper shining in his gaze. Ethan stepped off the stage, his body trembling, his heart racing. Adrian met him in the wings, his voice low. "You did it." Ethan's breath caught. "No, we did it." The night continued with celebration, but for Ethan, the award was not the highlight. It was the moment he realized that his journey had never been about proving his family wrong or silencing critics. It had been about finding himself, about believing in his worth, about discovering the love that had grown quietly, steadily between him and Adrian. Later, as the crowd dispersed and the lights dimmed, Ethan and Adrian stood together outside the theater. The city glowed around them, the night alive with possibility. Ethan held the award in his hands, his voice trembling. "I never thought I'd be here." Adrian's gaze was steady. "I did." Ethan looked at him, his heart racing. "Why do you always believe in me?" Adrian hesitated, then answered softly. "Because I see what you can't yet. And because I love you." The words hung in the air, heavy with truth. Ethan's breath caught, his chest tightening. He looked at Adrian, tears glistening in his eyes. I love you too." The confession was raw, unpolished, but it carried the weight of years of longing, of unspoken emotion, of a bond that had grown stronger with every struggle. They stood together in the glow of the city, the award gleaming in Ethan's hands, their hearts finally aligned. For Ethan, the journey had been long and painful, filled with doubt and rejection, but it had led him here, to recognition, to love, to the realization that he was enough. For Adrian, it had been a reminder of why he had fallen in love with storytelling in the first place, and of the power of believing in someone until they could believe in themselves. The night ended not with applause or headlines, but with two men standing together, their hearts open, their dreams intertwined. Ethan had won Best Actor, but more importantly, he had won himself. And with Adrian by his side, he knew that the future was not just bright, it was limitless.